Principal Matters Podcast, episode 509. Jen, can you believe it? 509 episodes. This is Will Parker back with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, for another Principal Matters episode. And Jen, this week, the guest that we will be introducing is not a stranger to me or many others in the world of education and especially inspirational speaking. Will Bowen is going to be our guest. Years and years ago, Will was in a conference I attended. It was going to be one of the very first times I was presenting, and he stayed in my session to give me feedback. And he's been helping educators and leaders for a long, long time in his work. And so we just happened to be at the same conference speaking in January. And so we got
Nice.
here at the same stage. And afterwards, we decided, man, you need to be on my show, Will Bowen. So he's you're going to get to meet him, listeners. But before we do, we always bring a question to listeners before our guests. And Jen, I'm just going to be selfish because I brought this up the last Monday Matters, but I'm going to be selfish in this Q&A. I got to hear more about Italy and gelato.
Yeah.
So you just returned from an amazing time in Greece and Italy. And but on a serious note, there are some lessons you've been thinking about from that trip and how they can help us think about our schools. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the trip was phenomenal. What was so neat about it, though, is it was a student trip. And we, I don't know how to say this without it sounding cliche, but it is so important for leaders to get back to the students. It's been a long time. I've been in my current role for 5 years, and I was interacting with students from seventh grade all the way up to just graduated, and they were delightful. We had just the most amazing time, and I mean, they made me laugh. These kids are funny. They were so tuned, it's so polite and respectful to the tour guides. Um, I just was blown away, and some of the leadership um, learnings that were reinforced were partly being in such an ancient place and revisiting those stories of history. And I would stand there and there'd be a tour guide there, and we would have those little devices in our ears. So the tour guide would be talking in a regular voice and we'd be listening, and we'd be talking about ancient wars, and we would be talking about architecture and famine and earthquakes and volcanoes and death and life. And I kept thinking, in all of these scenarios, there were children. And in all of these scenarios, there were children who needed to learn about the world. And we are so lucky that we have made progress in terms of how we educate in our educational system. And there are huge flaws, don't get me wrong. But this idea that every child deserves an education is something we really have to hang on to. There's a lot broken in the world right now, but that's happened before and it will happen again. But if we really can focus on our youth and make sure the kids are all right, boy, it gives me a huge amount of hope. There we are standing there talking about how the Persians wanted to take Greece to take over the entire Mediterranean and how horrible it was. And I'm like, this gives me hope. So a little twisted, but it certainly did. It's a reminder that,
It is.
yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking about in the conversations that I have with leaders, a lot of times, especially as they're setting goals for a new school year, Jen, I'll always talk about the things you and I talk about when it comes to beliefs and systems and people. But when we talk about the people that they're going to serve, I'm always curious to know like how they're going to develop their fellow leaders, how they're going to develop leadership among their teaching staff and their support staff. But then I'm also really curious to know how they're going to develop leadership among their students and how often are they connecting right back directly with those students. And a few weeks ago, I was on a call with a friend who's a superintendent that I'm supporting, and she really challenged me. She was telling me, she was inviting me to do some additional supports for her school going into the new school year. But she kind of put me on the spot because she said, "Will, I've got some development I'd like you to do with me and some of my leaders, some of my teachers. I'm curious what kind of development you could do with me and my students."
Mm,
And I paused and I was like, "Well, my niche, my focus is school leaders that, kids don't typically I don't typically see myself as that person that's gonna come in and motivate or inspire kids." And she was like, I'm not gonna let you off the hook." She was like, "You keep telling us that if we're not circling all the way back to students in this work, then we're really missing out on a key part. And my students, by the way, aren't really interested in someone who's cool. They
No
Uh,
offense.
no offense, no offense. She's like, but they deserve to be learning about these leadership principles just as much as everyone else on my team. And so, Jen, I had to do some hard thinking, and we're having some conversations about some ways I might be able to bring some support to her in that area too. But the important takeaway for me from that conversation was exactly what you said, which is how, and I'm not just saying this for you and me, I'm saying it to listeners too. How do you make sure in all of the strategy and all the work and all the focus that you're doing that um, that it involves your kids? Because at the end of the day, it's their voices, their input. We just recently had some principals on a principal and a team on our show. Um, I was just listening back to the conversation from last week's podcast, and I was just so encouraged to hear from another leader whose one of their priorities is pulling kids in regularly, whether that's for lunch times or advisories, and hearing from them directly, Jen. So thanks for that. I know we have a guest to introduce
Yeah.
here with Bowen, but thank you for letting me ask you again about some of the things you learned from your trip overseas. And Principal Matters listeners, as you're getting ready to step into a new school year, or as you're wrapping up your summer and you're going to listen to this conversation, you're going to be really inspired by this conversation with Will Bowen about how to respond to complaining, how to respond to some of that negativity that people bring, but how to do it in a way that's constructive and healthy. And so Jen, how can our listeners stay connected with you in the days ahead?
Absolutely. They can find me at jenschwanke.com. There they can drop an email or they can subscribe to my newsletter that comes every Tuesday.
And you can find all of today's resources at our website at williamdparker.com or at principalmatterspodcast.com. And Jen, until next time, thanks for doing what matters. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Everyone talks about the power of data-driven instruction, but what does that actually look like? Look no further than iExcel, the ultimate online learning and teaching platform for K-12. iExcel gives you meaningful insights that drive real progress, and research can prove it. Studies in nearly all 50 states across the U.S. show that schools that use iExcel outperform other schools on state tests. Educators who use iExcel love that they can easily see how their schools are performing in real time to make better instructional decisions. And iExcel doesn't stop at just data. iExcel also brings an entire ecosystem of resources for your teachers with a complete curriculum, personalized learning plans, and so much more. It's no wonder that iExcel is used in 95 of the top 100 school districts. Ready to join them? Visit iexcel.com/PM to get started. Support for Principal Matters comes from DigiCoach and its walkthrough tool. I want you to picture walking through classrooms, observing teachers and students. In just 10 minutes, you'd hope to see good instructional strategies and student learning taking place. Or maybe you have questions about something missing from instruction or planning. Instead of taking 30 minutes to write a follow-up email or leaving your teacher unsupported, wouldn't it be great to have an app on your phone or tablet where you could send immediate feedback while also collecting data? Enter DigiCoach, a customizable walkthrough and coaching tool created by school leaders for school leaders with thousands of pre-written research-based commendations and coaching tips, empowering you to provide quick, actionable feedback. DigiCoach is not an evaluation tool. Instead, it's an easy-to-use feedback and coaching tool, an efficient way to store your notes and collect data for improving student outcomes right in your hands. It can be used on iPhone, Android, or tablets and includes speech-to-text functions. Make the most of your walkthroughs with a tool that saves you time and enhances meaningful feedback to your teachers. Go to digicoach.com to learn more, and please tell them Principal Matters recommended you check them out. That's digicoach.com.
You're listening to Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast.
Principal Matters Podcast, episode 509. Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. And this week, we're going to be talking about a complaint-free world with my special guest, Will Bowen. Will Bowen is an internationally recognized speaker, author, and founder of A Complaint-Free World. This movement has inspired millions of people across more than 100 countries to live with greater positivity and personal accountability. He's best known for his best-selling book, A Complaint-Free World, which introduced a simple yet powerful idea. By becoming more aware of our words, especially complaints, we can transform our mindset, relationships, and results. His challenge has helped individuals and teams and organizations and schools break the habit of chronic complaining and replace it with intentional, solution focused thinking. And his message has been featured on major media outlets, including Oprah, NBC's Today Show, People Magazine, and I've seen him at other education conferences. In fact, just in January, Will, we get to see each other. So whether he's speaking to schools or corporations or leadership groups, Will Bowen equips people with the tools to elevate their thinking and ultimately their lives. Will Bowen, welcome to Principal Matters Podcast. Why don't you fill in the gap on that intro and tell listeners something else they may be surprised to know about you?
I think you covered it really well. Thank you very much. Yeah. As I mentioned when we were at that last event about 15 years ago, somebody saw me speak and read my book and brought me in to speak to a principals conference. And since then, about half of my presentations are at principals conferences, superintendents, and lots of school professional development days. So I tend to stay booked for
Well,
those.
you do. And Will, it's probably been 10 years ago when I wrote my first book, Principal Matters, and in Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Education Association of Elementary School Principals at that time was being led by Dr. Gracie Branch, had invited you in as a keynote speaker. And Gracie had reached out to me because we were friends and said, Will, would you like to come also and speak? And so it was one of the first opportunities that I had a platform like that. And I was talking to you back in January and you were honest enough to say, Well, I can't remember that. It's 10 years ago, but I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it because I talked to you during the break and you said, Hey, Will, listen, I'm going to set in on your session and I'll be glad to give you feedback since this is your first time. And you were so kind to listen to my presentation and talk to me afterwards and give me some pointers. So thank you, Will. You've been pouring into people's lives for a long time, including mine. And I can't believe I'm just now getting you on my show. One of my favorite stories you tell is your own journey through learning how to commit to stopping complaining, which sounds like so impossible, but it's inspiring. And can you share your journey of how you got to this place where this has become your platform?
Sure, happy to. I was teaching a class on prosperity in 2006, so 20 years ago. And I noticed that people were coming to me to learn how to be more prosperous. But at the same time, they complained incessantly about what they already had. And we were living in the healthiest, wealthiest time in human history, pre pandemic, pre housing crisis. So before teaching techniques for prosperity, it occurred to me, why not teach people to appreciate what they have? Because the opposite of complaining is gratitude. And so I just encourage people to go 21 days in a row without complaining. The idea being that once you do something 21 consecutive days, it becomes a habit. And I gave everybody these purple bracelets. And the idea is every time you catch yourself complaining, you switch the bracelet to the other wrist. Your goal is to go 21 days in a row without switching the bracelet. And the idea just exploded around the world. And as you say, I was fortunate enough to be on Oprah, and I'm the only author for whom Maya Angelou has written the foreword for their book. It's just been an amazing ride, and I'm so grateful.
I want you to back up on that story because I remember when I heard this the first time, you were transparent enough to share like a series of shorts of that every single day when you were trying to report in this journey of trying to go 21 straight. But how long did it actually take you, Will? Can you just unpack that a little bit? Because that was just tremendous.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It took about 4 to 8 months
Uh-huh.
because with the average person complains 15 to 30 times a day. And I was well above average. And I always joke that complaining is like bad breath. You notice it when it comes out of out of somebody else's mouth, but not when it comes out of your own. And it was fairly frustrating because you're on day one, then you're on day one, then you're on day one, and day one, and day one. And this can go on for a couple of months. But once you become aware of how often you're complaining, you're I think we're basically lazy people. We don't want to have to switch this bracelet. So we will begin to think of new and better ways to say what it is we want to say without complaining.
Well, I have never taken the challenge. I'm just gonna be straight up with you, Will, because when I saw you deliver that challenge and I saw how long it took, how many months it took you to get 21 straight days of not letting words come out of your mouth that would make you have to start all over again, I was like, "Man, what a commitment," but also what a commitment to doing exactly what you said, reforming the way that my brain has to think before I speak.
Mhm.
And I wanted to ask you this question because I've heard you speak on this, but what are you like to use an acronym to describe the 5 reasons people complain. Would you mind walking through that with us?
Mhm. Sure, happy to. And especially, excuse me, for your audience, I'd like to draw the distinction between what a complaint, excuse me, and what I call a request for accountability. A request for accountability is when someone feels that their expectations are not met and you are the person who could have, should have, might have met their expectations. If they speak directly and only to you, that's not a complaint. That is a request for accountability.
Mhm.
I draw that distinction because so often we can come home from the day feeling like we've been beat down by complaints. But if we're in a position of authority, if we're in a position of making things happen or not happen, we're going to deal with a lot of those requests for accountability. And when I speak to schools and do professional development, one of the things I'm very clear about is I'm not here to tell you to shut up and suck up whatever comes your way. That's not what this is about. This is about understanding that people are coming to you with complaints. And so I want to empower you to recognize, categorize, and respond to complaints.
Mhm.
So the acronym is GRIPE, GRIPE. People complain for one of 5 reasons. And ultimately, they're all done to get their social needs met. You see this a lot of when unhappy parents come in to talk to school officials or to teachers. The G stands simply for get attention. Human beings have a desperate need to be significant.
Mhm.
And if they can bring a problem to you, they then are the problem presenter and they've gotten attention. They want to be noticed. And so often you'll get this was me, by the way. I was middle child wanting to get attention, complained about my brothers all the time. When you get someone who is complaining just to get attention, they will start usually with a conversation like, well, here we go again, or can you believe it, or something like that. And these are the ones that you look at and you go, wow, you are really making a mountain out of a molehill. It's not that
Mhm.
big of a deal. But in their mind, they think that they're trying to get the issue resolved. In reality, they're trying to elevate their significance or their
Mhm.
status. Get attention. Notice me. Notice me. Now, when you get someone who is coming to you to complain just to get attention, and you spot this pattern, whether it's a parent or could be a teacher or anyone, even a student, you want to let this person know that they don't need to be the bad news bears. They don't need to come to you with bad stuff. They can get your attention by sharing good things. So, the way I recommend is that you begin to ask some form of what is going well? What are
Mhm.
you grateful about? What are you happy about? What's the best thing we've done at this school since your child's been coming here? Something like that. And always be prepared to ask when you see that person, have some little positive thing you want to ask. You know, what's what's the best thing you've seen on Netflix or the best meal you've eaten? And what that does is they don't realize they're complaining just to get your attention. So you're subtly letting them know they don't need to. They can get it anyway. So The G stands for get attention.
What I love about that first point is I have a good friend of mine who does a lot of coaching with teachers, and he said one of the best questions he asks when he's going to visit classrooms is to say, "Hey, what's something that went well for you today?" He starts there. And so you're inviting someone to immediately step into a positive posture before they share the challenge. And so thank you for that. The
Hmm.
G stands for get attention. What's the R stand for?
Get attention. The R stands for remove responsibility. Now, this is when you give someone a task. Could be anyone. Kids are great at doing this. And the person either doesn't want to do the task or they want to kind of phone it in. They don't want to do the work that's necessary. But they're not going to look at you and say, "Hey, Will, I'm not going to do a good job. I know that's what you want, but it's not going to happen." What they do is they complain about the circumstances surrounding the request. They'll say something like, "Will, I would love to do that, but," and then that "but" is an erasure word. And all they're doing is they're sort of softening the ground to let you know that the plant is going to fall over.
Mhm.
So people complain to be removed of responsibility. And what we want to do is we want to keep them responsible. Unfortunately, most people are good people. And I say that because when someone complains to be removed of responsibility, what they will often do is they will try and handle each of those complaints. Person says, "I would love to, but blah," you address that, then this, and eventually they just wear you down. So you want to put it back on them. And you just want to say, if it were possible, how might you do it?
Mm.
If it were possible, how might you, meaning not me, do it? The idea is to get them to think hypothetically because they're thinking of roadblocks. You want to think about them moving through it and get them to think about it.
Wow.
So that's the R in Gripe.
Okay, Will.
Remove responsibility.
You're gonna learn that Will always has to step in between this Will always because
Yeah.
I'm immediately thinking of another question that I love in that regard, when I've seen in those coaching situations, which is, what's the real problem here for you? Again, putting it right back into showing that person, okay, what are you responsible for here? And so when someone is in the attempt of removing responsibility, then you have to kind of switch it back to, okay, but then what is it that you can control? And what would it look like if you were able to do it? That's so good. What's the I?
Mhm. The I is inspire envy, which is just another way of saying brag. People complain to brag. It's a safe way of telling the world about your good fortune. You don't brag about your good fortune, you complain. So you might hear a parent go, "Oh, I had the busiest weekend. I had to take my daughter to state cheerleading finals. Then my son was in the quarterback of the football game, and then da, 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 da. Woe is me. I'm suffering under the weight of all these blessings." But it's a way of letting you know that all these great things are happening in my
Mhm.
life. Um, People will often complain about somebody else. I call this an invidious comparison. They would say, "Well, the analogy I like to use is you're having a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning and everybody's there except one person. And one of your other people looks around and goes, 'Well, we could get started, but Julie's late as
Mhm.
usual,' right?" That person is not letting you know Julie's late. He's bragging that he's on time.
Yes.
So what you want to do is say, compliment the opposite. In other words, you'd say, "Well, Mike or Tom, you know what I love about you? You're always on time." And this works amazingly well because you're subtly calling them out. They don't even sometimes know it. But what you're doing is you're giving them a backhanded compliment so they don't have to seek it themselves.
Todd Whitaker is another author that I've heard speak at education conferences, Will Bowen. And it's so funny. Everything you're saying is popping up an example in my mind because he will often talk to principals about when you're observing teachers. Let's say, for instance, teachers are failing to show up on bus duty. And he's like, you could come on the PA and say, stop missing bus duty. Or you could come on the PA and say, teachers, I want to just thank you for Mr. Smith for showing up, for acknowledge those who are, and compliment them, is a way to remind everybody that I value it when you show up for bus duty. And that doesn't mean that you never go and have a direct, crucial conversation with someone when they're not performing. But man, what a great way to respond to that, um, that tendency people have to inspire envy through complaining. You flip it, and your suggestion is to compliment the opposite. What's the P?
The P is power. So often, a parent will get upset about something, won't talk to the school, won't talk to the teacher, but they'll go around and talk to everybody else, you know?
Mm,
And then by the time they go to the school, they now have power on their side. In other words, they'll come in and say, I don't like the fact that the coat rack is 3 feet off the ground instead of 3.5 feet off the ground. And by the way, everybody else feels the same way.
mhm,
Whenever somebody says that, your mind should go, they didn't feel that way until you went around and riled them up. You know, you did this because most people are neutral about most things. And so to engage someone, the best thing is often to enrage them. I call it enrage and engage. If you can upset someone, you can get their attention and then you can focus that attention. So people complain for power. A lot of times in school situations, you'll get, I don't know, one teacher, one coach, whatever, who decides they don't like somebody else. So they go around and pss, 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 whisper about that person. Then eventually that person figures it out and they're pss, 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 and you get these alliances built up. And that's the worst thing you can do. That's a division of power. So when you can isolate whoever is leading this siloing of your school, the best thing to do is to talk to that person or those people and say, it sounds like the two of you have a lot to talk about.
mm.
So this is your response to power. When someone comes to you and says, well, blah, 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 about somebody else, it's a, your response should be, sounds like the two of you have a lot to talk about. The implication is you, not me.
Mm,
So go talk about it.
so good, Will.
And it addresses it. It's calling people on it without being petty about
So
it.
the response to power is again, you're not ignoring someone's complaint, but what you're trying to do is recognize the way to isolate that tendency towards outrage is to, when
Mm.
possible, pull parties together and let people talk directly, because there's going to be a much bigger opportunity for resolution than if this become, if you own this as something that you're going to resolve every single time yourself. What's that E in gripe?
Well, and the other thing, real quick, too,
Yeah.
with power is you're acknowledging that the person is being fractious, basically.
Mm,
You know, you're saying, hey, I see this. You know, I see that
yeah.
this is happening because problems like that dwell in the shadows.
Yeah. I used to have a fellow leader that would
Previously.
say, I had a fellow assistant principal that used to say to me, let's learn to talk to, not about. So whenever you're getting ready to
Yes.
go vent about someone, you're gonna, if you actually want to resolve it, go find them and talk to them, not about them. Wow.
Very
All
good.
right. GRIP. And then what's the E?
E. E stands for excuse poor performance.
Hmm.
Excuse poor performance. The E in gripe is the past tense of the R in gripe. The R is remove responsibility. I say, hey, Will, I'd like for you to do this for me. You really don't want to do it. You haven't even tried. So you complain about the circumstances. The E, which is excuse poor performance, you have tried, you didn't do a good job, but you want to maintain or elevate your social status, so you blame everybody else except yourself.
Hmm.
You blame anything that is available that might have slowed or impeded your progress. Well, I would have done a good job, but, and so you're just complaining to excuse your poor performance.
Mm.
And just like with remove responsibility, we want to we want to keep people accountable. A lot of this is about being communicating clearly and being accountable. And with remove responsibility, they haven't even tried. We want to keep them on the hook to try and do a good job. With excuse poor performance, we'll often say, well, why didn't you think about this? And why didn't you plan for that? And well, anybody could have seen that this would have gotten in your way. That just draws the person in words. It makes them withdraw. So what we want to do is we want to address everything they didn't do, but we don't want to do it about this time. We want to talk about next time. So we say, how do you plan to improve next time?
Mm.
If, well, it would have been this, it would have been that, and traffic, Miami traffic. How do you plan to improve next time? Well, I might leave 30 minutes early knowing that it's Miami traffic and it can be pretty crazy. So you're getting them to make commitments on future activities using the current thing as an example, but you're not beating them down about that.
Will, what I appreciate about your and Principal Matters listeners know I love to summarize. So the gripe, the reasons people complain: one, to get attention; two, to remove responsibility; three, to inspire envy; four, for power; and five, to excuse poor performance. And what you just did was give a flip side to every one of those of responses to that. And what I so appreciate about your work is, I don't know a better way to describe it. It's almost like if Will Bowen had a martial art in flipping complaints. It's like judo, man.
Yes.
But you've studied this for so long. And so the tips that you're giving, every single one of them, I have watched really strong leaders use. And so these aren't just like theoretical. I've really watched people that understand the judo of human interactions, whether that's a teacher with a student or an administrator with a parent or somebody with a fellow staff member. When somebody knows how to exercise these skills, it really can flip the narrative in that moment. It's not a it's not a it's not a silver bullet, but it is a skill you can learn. Um, this is not in my notes, but I'm going to ask you for this anyway. But I'm
Sure.
curious. I'm curious how you stay a student of this craft, because it's got to be hard to be thinking about consistently helping people work through the most negative parts of their work to try to flip it into a way that becomes more productive. So how do you um, how do you stay fresh on in the ways that you're learning to help people address these things?
It's really funny. I'll do 30 to 40 speaking events a year. And I've been doing it for almost 20 years. And it's amazing how many times people will come up to me and say, well, I've got a whole new reason for people complaining. And as I look at it, and I always do, because I'd like to know if there is another, if we need to add an S on gripe or something. I don't know. And I've never found anything that didn't fit under one of those five categories.
Yeah.
And that just makes it so fascinating to me. And the other thing is, what I love about what I do is, I get on stage. Will Bowen is the world authority on complaining. And you can hear everybody go, oh gosh, this is going to be terrible. And then they go, wow, that is so cool. That is so interesting. Because I don't complain about complaining. I think of it as a very interesting social phenomenon.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this question too, Will. I'm not trying to be provocative, but I'm just trying to stay real. And that is, and you're not the only person I've had this moment with. Whenever I'm reading
Mhm.
leadership authors, when I'm listening to podcasts by people I admire in industries that are being really successful, I see them practicing these principles that you're describing right here in terms of reframing the way we look at challenge, inviting people into growth versus just accepting um, lack of performance. These are all principles involved in every one of these things that you're describing. and they're principles that you and I both know work and see work in organizations that are doing really good work. And but I just have to say this out loud. It feels like in our culture and politics right now that so many of these principles just get thrown out the window when it comes to social media or the way that people behave in public. And so I'm just curious how for someone whose professional work has been to address these kinds of principles, what do you say to that person that's like, well, it doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work anymore. What would you say to them?
I say it's all working perfectly. It is all working perfectly. Social media is designed to attract you with whatever your interests are, like for me, scuba diving, travel, whatever. But then to slowly show you things that upset you. Somehow, Facebook knows that I travel a lot. So, invariably, I'm going to see somebody punching somebody out in the airport or somebody getting dragged off a plane. I didn't ask to see these things, but it knows that I like travel. And the other thing is the algorithm, because we will stare at a car accident,
Mhm.
longer than we'll look at a field of flowers, um, goes, oh, okay, now we found out what is upsetting to him, what enrages him. So it's not that I don't think that these things are working. I think that they're being exploited now at the highest possible levels.
Wow. Well said.
Politics is all about complaining. If you don't have a complaint, you don't have a campaign. I watched finally, and I'm a huge movie nut, but I just watched for the first time Taxi Driver with Martin Scorsese's movie with Robert De Niro. And in Taxi Driver, which it's all about a guy who slips mentally and tries to kill a politician, the politician gets in his cab and the politician says, Travis, what upsets you the most about what's going on in our country today? There's that enrage and engage. I didn't ask you what you're happiest about. I asked you what ticks you off so that my response can be, this is how I plan to address it.
Wow.
So, as sad as I would like it to say it is, that, it's just working better than ever before. And it's being weaponized. It's why um, parents are showing up all upset about things that they really have no experience of other than another parent told them, how to wine and cheese a bit or something. And it
I
just,
I appreciate that
it's working.
response. No, thank you so much for saying that because you're right. It's being the tendency towards in what a great example. What upsets you the most? The tendency towards inviting people into outrage is an exploitation of our tendency to want to gripe, want to complain. And for a leader, for somebody that's on the other side of that, having some skills to first take a breath, um, recognize that the moment that they're bringing you probably involves some of these very things that Will's talking about, but then recognizing, okay, how do I maintain some semblance of clarity and calm and patience in the face of what all the algorithms are pushing everyone towards, which will be outrage. And I know that's easy to say, it's hard to do. And you and I both know friends that are in industries or sit in board meetings or have folks come see them because of whatever that latest thing is that they're upset about. I like to say it this way, Will. Sorry, I'm gonna tell a quick story because I'm a
Yeah.
big Olympics fan, and a few years ago I was watching a Winter Olympics in Norway. Always does great. Well, they had a Norwegian cross country skier that I was watching because his name was Simon Kruger, and he was expected to like be in the front. And right when the race began, he tripped and he like face plants in the snow. And I was like, oh, poor guy. Like he's out, you know? But then as the race went on, he kept getting further and further up. And at the very end, he pushes to the front and he wins the gold medal. And so I'm like, what? And I'm just like going crazy watching this on my TV. And later, when they interviewed him, they said, what were you thinking when you were in like facing the snow? And he said, I thought, you got to switch your focus. You got to switch your focus. I need to get out of the snow and I got to get back up front. And he just kept pushing to the front, pushing to the front, push. And so, Will, when I hear you talk, I always feel like you're the person in the room going, yeah, someone's going to push your face in the snow. Someone's going to come in and they're going to say something that's going to be really hard. And you got to switch your focus. You can't step into the same trap that someone is trying to pull you into. You got to be able to switch that. And it's easy to say, but it's hard to do. So thank you for the practical ways that you have provided leaders and educators and people in all kinds of industries to know how to do that. As we're wrapping up, I want to give you an opportunity to tell people how they can connect with you, how they can get you at their school, but any parting words of advice that you have for listeners.
To dovetail on something you said, I read a book recently about a woman who didn't even know how many cards were in a deck and ended up winning the World Series of Poker.
No way.
18 months later. And they said, somebody asked her in an interview, when can you tell that somebody's going to lose when they sit down at one of these big tournaments and everything? And she says, it all happens in their own heads. She said, because you can sit down and go, everybody at this table has more chips than me, I'm dead. You're dead. She says, or you can look around and say, everybody's got way more experience than me, I'm dead. You're dead. She says, as long as you believe that you're in control of the situation, then you can win, no matter what is there. And what we forget is that we are in control of the situation. We abdicate it so often. And I just noticed we lost Chuck Norris today. He died.
Yeah.
He said something really interesting. He said, the time to learn karate is not when somebody is putting a gun in your ribs in an alley 2:00 in the morning. Take the ideas that I've shared with you. Be prepared to identify when somebody gets attention and say the right thing back, etc. Make little notes, put them on your desk. It will transform your interactions with people. And then it'll become a habit.
Oh, it will be.
And then to answer your question, you got it?
I keep my notes right here, Will.
Cool. To reach me, it's www.willbowen.com, WILLBOWEN.com. There are 3 different full speeches that I have given there, topics. And I started about 5 years ago asking people when they brought me in, school principals, et cetera, for a short review. And I've got hundreds of 30-second reviews on there. So feel free to check them out. You'll see, I'm sure you'll find other educators you know. And I'd love to work with you. My calendar tends to fill up for personal development days. So if you're interested in professional development, let me know and we'll talk.
Well, Will Bowen, what a privilege and an honor to have you on the show. This podcast just celebrated recently our 500th episode, our 10th year of being on the air. And so it's just so, to me, it's just an honor to have gone full circle in this work and to be able to bring your voice here today. So thank you for your time, the privilege of having you in the room and sharing your expertise with others. And Principal Matters listeners, thank you for doing what matters. And we'll talk to you again next week. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Principal Matters.